So let it be written, so let it be done. This is Tabletop Terrors, and I want to tell you a cool story about a game that I was in. Final session of a campaign, and it really affected the way that I think of mechanics. Jeff is a better storyteller when it comes to the details that make this matter, so I'm going to throw it to him. But I just want to say that you're going to walk away from this video with advice on how you can use or not use the mechanics of any RPG in a totally new way. So, Jeff, regale us with the tale of what happened in this climactic battle.
Yeah, so as Tim said, this was the last session of a very long-running campaign, 2 to 2.5 years. And this was like the very last boss fight of the very last session, so sort of the big finale to the whole thing in a lot of ways. And at this point, the fight had been going on for quite a while already. But we got into a situation where one of the players had received a Bardic Inspiration die from another player, and they went to cast a spell on the big bad, and the big bad rolled a saving throw and like barely passed it, like exactly met the DC. And the player sort of like was just sort of speaking out loud, like, "Oh shoot, you can't use Bardic Inspiration dice to affect saving throws, can you? It's only attack rolls and your own saving throws." And of course, everyone else was like, "Yep, that's technically how it works. That sucks, but what can you do?" And the GM in that situation offered an alternate trade, basically, of resources, and said, "If you want, you don't have to, but if you want, if you use a point of inspiration, if you have one, I will let you use your Bardic Inspiration die to like raise your DC, basically, of the spell." And the player was like, "Yep, absolutely, I'll do that." And they tossed the point of inspiration, and they rolled the Bardic Inspiration die. And as a result, the boss failed the save of the spell, which I think it was even that spell, if I remember right, that literally finished the fight. Like
Yes.
that was the killing blow
Yes.
to the big bad in that moment. So it was a very sort of just interesting change of resources as far as like, you can't normally do that. Like the rules of Bardic Inspiration say you can add to your attack rolls and your saving throws and your skill checks. There's nothing in there about enemy saving throws. But the GM just decided like, hey, like this is a big moment. This is not only a big moment, it's the big moment, the whole sort of culmination of everything. It's better for the game if this works, but rather than just say like, "Oh no, he rolled a 16, not a 17, so actually he failed." Like, instead of sort of giving it away for free, he said like, "Okay, well, technically this is where we're at, but we have these resources. Let's make use of them. So let's use inspiration, and we'll let inspiration in this scenario do that." That doesn't mean that you can use Bardic Inspiration for enemy saving throws as inspiration all the way going forwards, but in this moment we'll allow that to happen because it's the big moment. And the player did it, and they killed the boss as a result, and it was an awesome moment for the game. It was one of the coolest parts of the fight to sort of be able to see that be the thing that finished the boss off. So I guess the sort of point to all this story is you can consider as a GM, when the moment is right, and it's fair to say no to this sometimes, but when the moment is right, it's okay to offer to players to use resources in ways that might normally be unconventional, as long as it's sort of in the spirit of the rules and of the story to get to where you need to go. So that's at least what happened in the game. And now we'll talk a little bit more about how you can use this generally.
So I really like this because it does a lot of things, and one of my favorites that it does is it really treats the rules of the game, sometimes things that we can feel are very strict or constrain us, and it allows us to look at them more as tools than as things we have to follow, policies, things that we can't break or bend. And I really like the idea that he kept the economy but still allowed another chance. You know what I mean? It was like getting you more invested, kind of in the same way that inspiration does, but because you weren't rolling. Like, in a sense, he found another way for you to spend inspiration. And that, yeah, I don't think there were any downsides to it. But in general, I think that a lot of the time players don't necessarily they think too much through the lens of the rules that they learned and the things that their character can do, and not enough about the things that they want to do. He wanted to kill the big bad there. I guess that's a bad example maybe, but the idea that as a player, I think you should be deciding what you want to do, and if it's not within the rules of the game, potentially, trying to, in a sense, negotiate with your GM about how you could do that, because the goal of the game is to simulate the things you want to do. Not necessarily, like, the game just tries to guess a lot of the situations you'll be put in, but not every mechanic is for every situation, and that's okay. So I don't think really there's anything wrong with being a player that tries to creatively use what they have, because the rules say one of the ways you can use some of these things, but not really the only way, and I think it's really important for players to look at it that way.
Yeah, and this, this kind of advice where it's like, okay, think of what you're going to do first, then look at your character sheet to see what resource might help you do it. It can seem kind of big and scary, both to the player and to the game master. So what I've seen is the way that works, this creativity, is that you shouldn't be doing it every time. I think that this is a really far end of the spectrum example. Final boss, final session, campaign ender. Things don't have to be that big and dangerous to do this, but you also, in my opinion, should make it a moment that counts. In general, when you're trying to do these switch of resources, because it makes it special. So for you, that could be if it was the difference between, being captured or not. You're not fighting the final boss, but this is important. Or getting away, or capturing someone before they get away. Those are the kinds of moments, if you want to punch up something narratively, that's when I would probably do this, because it can also get kind of tired if every turn you're trying to auction your powers to the game master and be like, well, what if I, can I do this way and this way? So that's one rule. The other thing is, as a game master, is the more you are fair about saying no in the right times, the more these moments matter. If it's yes, 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 it just feels like there aren't any barriers and there's no challenges. So these moments work really well if the game master, when looking at the situation logically, is like, I don't think so. I don't think that one would work, but that was creative. It's okay to say no to this stuff so that when you do say yes, it punches it up a little more.
Yeah, and one pattern, I guess, to note there that I didn't even notice until Tim was just talking about it now is, I think the best way for this tool to be used as a game master, as far as looking when to allow it, is for game changer or encounter ending moments. So it wasn't like, okay, I missed my attack roll against the random guard that would have knocked him from 50 hit points to 42 hit points. Can I use inspiration to hit him and do 8 damage? It's like, no. But if it was the guard who was about to push the emergency alarm button, and once that's hit, then you're going to be swarmed, then you're going to get captured or whatever, and it'll end the fight right away if you could have dealt that last 5 hit points that he had, then that's the time I think to consider, is this going to be a moment that impacts in a big way whether or not this goes right or wrong? For instance, the killing blow of the final boss is a pretty big moment of a game. So I guess as far as a GM, I guess that's just a good baseline rule of thumb. It's not going to work every single time in either direction, but I guess it's a good starting point as far as if you want to start dipping into this, look for those moments, the encounter ending moments, or if they would have succeeded, it would have been a big game changer. That's, I think, the time to start. And then you can start experimenting with it and see how it best sits with your table and your style. But if you want to try it out, I think that's the first place to look.
Yeah. And so tell us in the comments, what is that moment for you as a GM or a player? Because I think we've all kind of experienced this where you just come up with that crazy idea and it feels right. And did it work out? What moment as a player did you get super creative with the mechanics? Or what moment as a GM did you just say, I have to say yes to this because it's just the way to go? Or Maybe you said no. I'd love to hear about it. We would love to hear about it. We're Tabletop Terrors. We're all about fun, creativity, and tabletop games. If that's the kind of stuff you love too, then consider subscribing. And as usual, we're going to end things with the Tabtarian toast.
May you mend the first break.
May you kill the first snake.
May you conquer everything you undertake.
Sláinte. I have an example of this. I had this, and I didn't know how they were going to get out of it, but I was playing this campaign. James was in it, and there's this big like magic storm called the Bleak Storm in the campaign world we're playing in Dragongrim, and this thing comes rolling in, and they're pretty low level, maybe even like level 1, like level 2 maybe, and so I'm like, I don't know. And so I even think I started like narratively building in a way out because I thought they're gonna die.
Yeah.
And so like I even like kind of railroaded it. It was bad. But James comes up with this crazy idea and saves the whole party. He says, I have this idea if you'll let it fly. I go, okay. And I think he took out a literal feather and then cast the spell Featherfall and used it to like basically create a whirlwind, like a tunnel that the players could use to run out. So that's an example of like, that's cool. That's the perfect example where I maybe made it a little too hard as a GM and was kind of like, uh-oh. So they got creative and he used the spell non-mechanically, just narratively, and it worked and they survived to live another day.
Yeah, I especially love that because the more I think about spells in D&D, Featherfall, like a spell in D&D, Featherfall is one of many things you can do with a specific type of where I'm like, well, it's really wind moving.
You're
so
airbender. You're an airbender, baby.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's like he would have done this before, so yeah, that was a cool moment.